Hello and welcome. In the sprawling universe of celebrity, there are encounters. And then there are convergences, moments when two worlds, two entirely different realities, collide with such force that the shockwaves reveal something profound about the very nature of fame, fandom, and the future. Today, we delve into one such convergence, a story that, on its surface, seems simple. A devoted fan gets to meet his lifelong idol. But when the fan is a notorious staffer from the most infamous radio show in history, and the idol is a fire-breathing, money-printing rock god who has just sold his band's soul to technology for a shot at immortality, the story becomes something else entirely. This is the tale of Sal Governale, the everyman prankster from the chaotic court of Howard Stern, and Gene Simmons, the self-proclaimed god of thunder, the demon of Kiss, and one of the most brilliant and ruthless marketing minds the world has ever seen. This wasn't just a handshake and a photo op. This was a summit, taking place in the shadow of a world-shaking, $300 million deal that promises to change music forever. A meeting between a man who represents the raw, unfiltered voice of the common fan, and a man who has transcended mortality to become a brand. What was said? What was seen? And what does this single day tell us about the final, shocking chapter of the Kiss legacy? Settle in, because we are pulling back the curtain on a story of dreams, demons, and the dawn of a new, digital era of rock and roll. This is the story of the day a stockbroker from Long Island stepped into the immortal world of a god. To comprehend the monumental significance of this meeting, we must first understand the journey of the fan. Who is Salvatore Governale to the uninitiated? He is a staff writer and comedian on the Howard Stern Show, but to the legions of devoted, longtime listeners of that radio empire, he is so much more. He is Sal the stockbroker, a figure of immense comedic tragedy, a walking embodiment of the suburban dream clashing with D-list celebrity aspiration. Before he ever set foot inside the SiriusXM studios as an employee, Sal was a voice on the phone, a regular caller who, like millions of others, felt a deep, personal connection to the world Howard Stern had created. He was a stockbroker by trade, living a life of numbers and transactions, but his soul was clearly yearning for the chaos and catharsis of entertainment. The Howard Stern Show of the mid-1990s and early 2000s was a cultural lightning rod. It was a pirate ship on the airwaves, gleefully shattering taboos and providing a platform for a cast of characters, pranksters, and misfits who felt more real than any scripted television show. To be a part of that world, even as a caller, was to be a part of a secret club. Sal's calls, often laced with his signature misguided sincerity and a thick Long Island accent, made him a fan favorite. He wasn't just a fan, he was one of them. He spoke their language, he shared their obsessions. His moment to transcend from fan to paid insider came in 2004. Through a crucible of fire that could only exist in the Stern universe, the Win John's Job contest. When longtime staffer stuttering John Melendez controversially left the show to become the announcer for Jay Leno on *The Tonight Show*, it left a void. Howard, in a stroke of genius, turned the hiring process into a brutal, on-air reality show. Superfans and aspiring comics were pitted against each other in a series of humiliating and hilarious challenges, all for a chance to land a full-time spot on the show. It was a gauntlet of public opinion, a trial by radio. Sal Governale, the stockbroker with a habit of making prank calls, entered the fray, and against all odds, he emerged victorious, alongside his creative partner, Richard Christie. Sal's life was forever changed. He had breached the wall, he was inside. But his role on the show cemented his persona as the ultimate everyman. His on-air bits often revolved around his real-life struggles, his hilarious mispronunciations, his questionable health theories, and his often failed attempts to appear sophisticated. He was relatable in his flaws, and through it all, one thing remained a constant. A bedrock of his personality, his deep, unwavering, almost religious devotion to the band Kiss, and specifically, to its demonic, tongue-wagging co-founder, Gene Simmons. For Sal, Gene wasn't just a rock star, he was a blueprint for success, a figure of mythic power and intelligence. Gene was everything Sal, in his wildest dreams, aspired to be: confident, powerful, wealthy, and revered. This idolization wasn't a casual fandom, it was a core part of his identity, a running theme for decades of his life. And so, the chance to spend a day with Gene Simmons wasn't just a fun segment for the show. It was the culmination of a lifelong pilgrimage. Now, let us turn our attention to the idol himself. To understand Gene Simmons is to understand the complete fusion of art and commerce. of primal rock and roll and calculated, predatory capitalism. He is a figure who defies simple categorization. He is the demon on stage, a fire-breathing, blood-spitting caricature of rock excess, and he is Chaim Wittz off stage, the immigrant boy from Haifa, Israel, who arrived in America at the age of 8 with his mother, Flora, a Holocaust survivor. This origin story is the key to everything. Gene Simmons didn't just stumble into success. He hunted it. He willed it into existence with a ferocity born from having nothing. He watched his mother work tirelessly, and he vowed he would never be poor. Music was not just his passion. It was his weapon of choice in a war against obscurity and poverty. In the gritty, glam-infused cauldron of early 1970s New York City, he and a like-minded, ambitious visionary named Paul Stanley decided to create a band that was more than a band. It would be a spectacle, an assault on the senses. They didn't want to just be heard. They wanted to be seen and experienced. This was the genesis of Kiss. They understood, with a prescience that was decades ahead of its time, that in a crowded marketplace, image was everything. They created for distinct, larger-than-life personas: the star child Paul Stanley, the spaceman Ace Frehley, the Catman Peter Criss, and of course, the demon Gene Simmons. The makeup was their mask, their shield, and their brand. It created a mystique that was irresistible. For years, the band was never photographed without the makeup, a brilliant marketing ploy that fueled endless speculation and obsession. Their stage show was a declaration of war on the subdued concerts of the era. It was a blitzkrieg of pyrotechnics, smoking guitars, levitating drum kits, and Gene's now legendary theatrics. Spitting blood, a mixture of yogurt, food coloring, and syrup, and breathing fire were not mere gimmicks. They were tribal rituals, shocking and captivating audiences, turning a rock concert into a traveling circus of glorious, deafening excess. And the music was the soundtrack to this mayhem. Straightforward, anthemic, hook-laden rock and roll. Songs like Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City, and Shout It Out Loud became the hymns for a generation of kids who felt like outsiders. The Kiss Army, their official fan club, wasn't just a mailing list. It was a global community, a legion of devotees. But while the music conquered the charts, Gene Simmons was playing a different game. He saw every aspect of the band as a branding opportunity. He famously declared that he would license anything, and he meant it. While other bands focused on selling records and t-shirts, Kiss put their iconic logo and faces on literally everything. There were Kiss comic books, where their blood was mixed into the red ink. There were KISS action figures, lunch boxes, pinball machines, and Halloween costumes. And in a move that cemented his legend as the ultimate rock and roll capitalist, there was the infamous Kiss casket, a fully functional coffin emblazoned with the band's imagery, so that the most devoted fans could rock and roll all night, forever. Too many rock purists. This was sacrilege. It was selling out in its most blatant form, but to Gene, it was genius. He understood that a brand was more durable than a hit song. A brand could last forever. A brand could make you wealthy beyond the wildest dreams of a touring musician. And underpinning this entire empire was a personal philosophy that was the polar opposite of the rock and roll cliché. While his peers were destroying themselves with drugs and alcohol, Gene Simmons famously abstained from both. He was a teetotaler, a clear-headed businessman in a demon's costume, counting the money while others counted their empty bottles. He was a multi-hyphenate entrepreneur long before the term became fashionable, extending his empire into television with his reality show Gene Simmons Family Jewels, into film, publishing, restaurants with his Rock and Brews chain, and countless other ventures. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But these accolades seemed almost secondary to his true achievement, transforming a rock band into a global, multi-generational, billion-dollar brand. This is the titan that Sal Governale, the superfan, was about to meet. But he wasn't meeting him at a moment of quiet reflection. He was meeting him at the very epicenter of the band's most audacious, controversial, and potentially revolutionary act. For years, the end of Kiss had been a recurring theme. They had a farewell tour back in 2000, which many fans believed was the true end. Life for the band to reform with new members Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer replacing Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. This history created a healthy dose of skepticism when, in 2018, the band announced their final tour, The End of the Road. It was billed as a multi-year, globe-spanning victory lap, a last chance to see the hottest band in the world live. It began in January 2019, a spectacular production That delivered everything the fans expected, but it soon became an odyssey. The tour was forced to a halt in 2020 by the global pandemic, stretching the long goodbye into an almost endless farewell. Finally, the end was officially scheduled. December 1st and 2nd, 2023. 2 nights at the legendary Madison Square Garden in their hometown of New York City. The final show was streamed live on pay-per-view across the globe. The atmosphere was electric, emotional, historic. Generations of the Kiss Army, from original 70s fans to kids with freshly painted faces, gathered to witness the end of an era. The band played with a furious energy, a final, thunderous performance of their greatest hits. As the final notes of rock and roll all night faded amidst a storm of confetti and pyrotechnics, Paul Stanley gave a tearful, heartfelt speech. The end of the road, he declared. And for a moment, it seemed like a truly definitive, emotional conclusion to a 50-year career. But then, the lights dimmed. And what happened next sent a shockwave of confusion, excitement, and horror through the entire music world. On the giant screens, the band reappeared. But it wasn't them, it was something else. Towering, digital, hyper-realistic avatars of the 4 members, rendered as giant, comic book versions of their personas. The Demon, the Starchild, the Spaceman, and the Catman, reborn in a digital fire. As the avatar of Paul Stanley promised that the band had been made immortal, and that a new era of Kiss was beginning, the truth became chillingly clear. This wasn't the end, it was a transaction. The end of the road tour wasn't just a farewell. It was a marketing campaign for their next evolution. The bombshell news soon followed. In a deal reportedly worth over $300 million, Kiss had sold their entire brand, the music catalog, their name, their iconic likenesses, the very essence of what they were, to Pophouse Entertainment, the Swedish company behind the revolutionary ABBA Voyage show. The plan was now laid bare: a biopic, a KISS-themed experience, and most audaciously, a full-on Avatar show, slated to launch in 2027. Kiss, the human band, was over. But Kiss, the intellectual property, would live on forever. Powered by the wizards of industrial light and magic, the reaction from fans was violently divided. To some, it was a stroke of genius, the ultimate Gene Simmons move ensuring the brand's survival long after he and Paul were physically unable to perform. It was a way to introduce KISS to new generations, to achieve a form of corporate immortality. To others, it was the ultimate betrayal, a ghoulish, soulless cash grab that turned their heroes into digital puppets. It raised uncomfortable questions. Are these avatars even Kiss? Can art exist without the artist? Was the final tour, with all its emotion, just a calculated prelude to a business deal? Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons insisted they would be heavily involved, that this was their baby and they were in the trenches with Pophouse, guiding the new era. But the line had been crossed. They had sold their ghosts, and it is into this strange new world. This twilight zone between human performance and digital immortality. That Sal Governale stepped for his day with Gene Simmons. This is what makes the timing of their meeting so incredibly compelling. Sal wasn't just meeting his rock and roll hero. He was meeting the man who had just presided over the end of rock and roll as we know it, and the birth of something entirely new and unknown. He was granted an audience not just with the Demon, but with the CEO of a brand that had just become eternal. The video recap of their day together is more than just a piece of content. It's a historical document. It captures the moment a superfan gets to probe the mind of the architect, right after the final brick has been laid on a 50-year empire and the blueprints for a new digital one have been unveiled. One can only imagine the questions swirling in Sal's head, the representative for millions of fans. Did he ask about the avatars? Did he ask if it felt strange to see a digital version of himself preparing to take his place? Did he get a glimpse of the real man behind the Demon, a man contemplating a legacy that would now literally outlive him? And what of Gene? For him, this meeting is a masterclass in brand management. Even after selling the farm, he remains the face of the company. He is still performing, not with Kiss, but with his own powerhouse Gene Simmons Band, featuring a lineup of killer musicians like Brent Woods, Zach Throne, and Brian Tichy. He's still hitting the stage, playing KISS deep cuts and rock classics. Why? Because the brand must never seem dormant. The Demon must never sleep. Whether he's touring with his solo band, offering fans the chance to be his roadie for a day for a hefty price tag, or sitting down with a stern show staffer, Gene Simmons is always on, always selling, always reinforcing the power and mystique of the brand he built from nothing. His day with Sal is not an act of pure fan service. It's a strategic move in the perpetual motion machine that is the KISS Enterprise. It's a way to connect with the grassroots, to speak directly to the heart of his army through one of their own. Even as his creation ascends into the digital ether, this meeting was a collision of the tangible and the intangible. Sal Governale, a man whose entire career is based on his raw, flawed, and very human personality, comes face to face with Simmons, a man who has successfully transformed his own personality into an immortal, untouchable piece of intellectual property. It's a story about the American dream, taken to different, extreme conclusions. Sal achieved his dream of getting out of the stockbroker's office and into the world of his heroes. Gene achieved his dream of building an empire so vast and so powerful that it no longer requires his physical presence to exist. So, as we watch the footage of these two men spending a day together, we are seeing more than a fan and a star. We are seeing a conversation between the past and the future of entertainment. We are seeing the human embodiment of a fanbase getting a final, close-up look at his hero, just as that hero is about to vanish into the machine he so brilliantly created, leaving behind a digital ghost to rock and roll all night, for all eternity. A truly remarkable convergence. A day that started as a fan's ultimate fantasy became a snapshot of a tectonic shift. In the landscape of music and legacy, Sal Governale got his audience with the God. But he did so at the very moment that God was revealing his plans for everlasting life, not in the heavens, but on a server farm, rendered in pixels and light. The story of KISS is no longer just about four guys in makeup from New York. It's now a story of technology, branding, and the audacious, unsettling quest for immortality. And for one day, a humble stockbroker from the Howard Stern show stood at the very heart of it all, a witness to the end of the road and the beginning of an entirely new and uncertain digital highway. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a story far more complex than it first appeared. Until next time.